the hope for a better world, or hope for the better world as we emerge from the COVID-19 pandemic. The title is invented by David Hilson, and together I thought out of 4 titles he suggested, and this was perhaps the most relevant in today's context. Now let me just give you a very brief introduction about what is happening. The novel coronavirus, a tiny micron, has brought the entire world to a grinding halt and to their knee. Globally, 14.5 million at least persons are affected, with over 600,000 deaths. Remember, these figures are documented figures. A Stanford guru, whom I'm going to quote you, it would be mind-boggling if you see how many people are already affected, which are not reported. This world will never be the same as before COVID-19. Made us less egoistic. This has taught us that we think that we are mighty, mighty people. 1 micron can teach you. Please do not think that. The second one which I want to show you here is the underprivileged. And I think we have responsibility. We may not be in that category, but it's our responsibility to see them. And that's what it means to be human being. The underprivileged and economically weak are most impacted, especially in underdeveloped countries. Partly true in advanced countries as well, developed countries, where the local people, local income group are mostly impacted in comparison to the others. The third one, which I want to show you here, exploring new options. Now, this is important. And this is what I have discussed with David in a couple of our exchange of mails, that what are the threats, what are the opportunities, what are the options we have today as a human race. It's not an issue of me and you, it's an issue of the planet Earth. So exploring new options coupled with collective wisdom, and exploration of our mindset for new ways to tackle the threat of survival must be fully exploited. The collectivism. One more slide, I just want to show 2 more PPTs. Human race has survived and prospered in spite of massive setbacks through the ages. We had a lot of setbacks. Spanish flu, plague. At that time, we were not so advanced in the time of plague. Perhaps it's a part of our DNA, the human being's DNA, to face challenges and move forward. And we have indomitable spirit. The human beings cannot be defeated. We will win over COVID, this devil, small micron. Innovative framework of mind is what is going to be basically our collective work. The pandemic has highlighted the links between the environment, health, human beings, and the economy. We see major consequences on economy, society, and mental health. Worldwide, countries significantly impacted by COVID, but pandemic also provides an opportunity. And that's what David was saying in one of my conversations, that I think we should be looking at more opportunities, a positive side of what is happening. Because everybody in the media, everybody in the newspaper, everybody you talk about deaths and so much million, and you feel such a negative, you feel that you're going to die, actually. There should be a positivism, collectivism to say, hey guys, we are going to win. It's a football match, we are going to score. So I would say the opportunity to mankind, which we will share together, to wake up, to create a new world order, balancing planet, people, and profit. When I say profit, it means economy. One more slide just to end this known data point. The whole human race, the 3 colors will vary. In the old age, in the tribal age, in the primitive age, green will be much less. Everything will be more red because we don't know when the lion will come and catch us. So the coloring system itself is changing as we progress in time. Green and yellow and red. So known data points, yellow is data analytics. Today we live in the digital age, internet age. We have to have all satellites all over us. We should be able to analyze the data for the betterment of the society and human being. And the last one is what we see in pandemic, possibility and not probability. We do not deal with probability, we deal with the possibility. So this is all what I want to share, set up the tone. And now, as I mentioned to you, Dr. David Hilson, I have personally met him 2 years ago, but I have known him for the last 15, 20 years through our common association in the PM, Global PM Advisors, and appreciating each other's work in respective areas. And we had offered him and conferred him as the honorary fellow of CPM 2018, and for his contribution to make the society better. He has been talking about a lot through his videos and all about swan, black swan, whether the pandemic is a black swan or is not. And he has made a lot of videos. Now, may I now request, before we talk about the theme of the webinar, to give him 5 to 6 minutes, his perspective, whether COVID-19 is a black swan or not. David, it's you now.
Thank you, Adesh. What I did want to say before I start is that it is a real privilege and honor to be sharing this webinar setting with you. And what we're going to be doing in this session is more informal and conversational. I think I've certainly learned a lot from you over the years through your speaking and writing, and then from meeting you in person. I hope I've been able to make some contributions that you found valuable as well. So what we're going to do in this period is to just switch between us. I'll say some things, you'll say some things, and we'll develop some things together. And I hope our participants will find that approach interesting and more useful and more easier to listen to than one talking head and another talking head. So we want to have more of a conversation and a discussion. We are welcoming your questions through the chat box to take a look at those at the end of our presentation part. But this question of black swans is very interesting. A black swan is a kind of jargon phrase which is used in quite widely to talk about a particular type of risk. And the black swan idea came from this book. It was published in 2007 by a man called Nassim Nicholas Taleb. You probably can't see the name. But in this book, he talks about the impact of the highly improbable. And what he says is that black swans are a particular category of risk. Now, a lot of people get confused and use the terms in the wrong way. And some people are saying, well, clearly the coronavirus pandemic comes under the category of what Taleb is calling a black swan. And I'd like to suggest to you that that's not true. And the reason that it's not true is not just because there's a piece of risk-related jargon that isn't applicable, but it relates to the way that we approach this pandemic and also future pandemics and future things that could affect us globally in a really significant way. So Taleb says that black swans have 3 characteristics. First of all, they are entirely unpredictable and unknowable. You cannot imagine the thing that happens. It emerges from a dark place, from a place of mystery, a place of unknown, and we could not have imagined it. We could not have predicted it. The second characteristic is that it has an extreme impact. And the third characteristic that Taleb uses is that once it's happened, we look back and we say, of course, we should have seen this coming. And there are lots of examples that he gives in this book. But I'd like to say that the coronavirus pandemic is absolutely not a black swan because it was entirely predictable. It was knowable in advance. And not only was it predictable, it was predicted. So we did have a global flu-based coronavirus pandemic 100 years ago in 1918. It was called the Spanish flu, and it infected the world and 50 million people died. It was an absolute disaster. And since then, people have been aware of the possibility that another similar global pandemic could occur. And there's been lots of discussion over the last 20, 30 years, and probably a little bit longer, to say the world needs to prepare for another Spanish flu. And I just want to give you a few highlights of some of the places where we have seen the coronavirus pandemic coming. The UK has a national risk register. I'm based in England, and so the UK National Risk Register was started in 2007, and the very first issue of that had a global pandemic, an influenza pandemic, as a top risk. And the quote was, "Experts agree there is a high probability of another influenza pandemic occurring, although we cannot forecast its exact timing or the precise nature of its impact." In October 2016, the UK government hosted exercise Cygnus. And here is the start of the report. The Cygnus report in October 16 was specifically looking to see how the UK government would respond to a major flu pandemic in the UK. And the results highlighted big gaps in our emergency preparedness. A few years later, in 2019, the City of London had its own risk register. This is dated January 2019. The pandemic influenza was the second highest risk after a failure of the transmission network, the electricity transmission network. They said a worldwide outbreak of influenza could affect up to 50% of the population of the UK, with up to 750,000 fatalities. This was predicted in 2019 if we did nothing. Then we had the world, more recently, the world at risk. This report was published in September 2019 by the Global Preparedness Monitoring Board. Here they said that the world is not prepared, I'm quoting here, for a fast-moving respiratory pathogen pandemic. If a similar contagion occurred today, similar to 1918, 50 to 80 million people could perish. And in addition, a pandemic could cause panic, destabilize national security, and seriously impact the global economy. And this report makes 7 recommendations to global governments, none of which were implemented, not one. Now, I think we have to learn something from this. People are looking to me as a risk professional and saying, why didn't you tell us this was coming? And the answer is, we did tell you this was coming, but you didn't do anything about it. And the question is, how do we respond to these kinds of warnings in future? And that will be something that we need to think about. So I would say quite clearly, the coronavirus pandemic is not a black swan, because it was not only predictable, but it was predicted. However, as we'll perhaps talk about a little bit more, Adesh, between us, there are unexpected risks which emerge from the pandemic now that it's happened. I would say there is one clear black swan, something that we really didn't see coming, that's come out of the pandemic, and that is the global lockdown. So my wife and I were in Africa. We spent some time in Africa in January and February and March of each year. And in February, when the pandemic started to emerge in China, China locked down the city of Wuhan and Hubei province. I turned to my wife and I said, that could happen in China, a complete lockdown. That would never happen anywhere else. We couldn't have that in Europe. We couldn't have that in the UK. And 3 weeks later, there was a lockdown in the north of Italy. And I turned to my wife and I said, that's a surprise, lockdown in Italy, but of course it could never happen anywhere else. And now we've had 2/3 of the world's population in some form of lockdown. That, I believe, was unforeseeable. And that has been a black swan that we're struggling to respond to. And some countries, and of course India is amongst those, is still in the middle of that crisis. But I think although the coronavirus itself is not a black swan, there are real risks which we can and must see and respond to proactively, which emerge from it. And maybe, Adesh, you and I can talk about what some of those things might be. What are the risks that arise from the coronavirus pandemic now it's happened? Adesh, you're still muted. Adesh, you will need to unmute. Very good.
When I listen to you, I always behave as a student and a good student. who believes in listening and listening. I'm sorry, I couldn't put the unmute. I'm going to show you, before I respond to your extremely relevant question, how to balance, and the risk which we are facing today. I will also take a little bit help of the PPTs to show you my ideas about the risk. And this would be this part. And this is going to come a little bit after 2-3 things, the question which you raised. As per WHO, 90% of world population breathes polluted air. Silver lining, of course, the positive side of pandemic is that the wide lockdowns have had a positive impact on rejuvenating planet Earth. The place where I stay, I see in the morning birds singing, 6 o'clock. I can see sky clear. I can see stars. So, this is a positive side of it, but as you ask the question about the rest, I'll come to that. We are again seeing blue skies, CO2 emissions are down significant. Let me put it in animation mode, actually. I was not putting in the animation mode. And this is silver line. The third one is, we are again seeing blue skies in all this I mentioned to you. Now, this is a strategy which will come later on, and David will also show his views how to overcome this massive disaster. Integration as a policy, global integration, and not division, not nationalism. Me first. Those days are gone in today when we face a common enemy, an enemy which cannot be seen. These are saboteurs, invisible enemies. How do we work with them? So unless there is a global community, we will not be able to do that. How? Now this is a very interesting point I especially made today, that when we will look into the risk mitigation, hope is not a strategy. Hope, I hope it will happen. We must have an effective strategy to materialize our hope. Many people will say something will happen, and that is again a risk in the mindset of the people that they are not taking it so seriously. Something will happen. Hope. That's not going to be important. It's a big risk, David, to me, that mindset provides a very big risk in today's circumstances. We need a global strategy, as I mentioned before, again, for cooperation in research and in public health to deal with the current pandemic and prepare for any such catastrophic situation. We have seen this, how many loopholes we see in the public health system in developing and developed countries. In today's digital age, this is very important. I'm not going to be politicizing this particular bullet, but if you can, I will leave it to your imagination as how the information flow gets connected with everything we do. In today's digital age, information flow should be instantaneous whenever we face a pandemic like COVID-19. Could be any pandemic, disaster, water floods, earthquakes. The time has to be very important. Delay in information sharing can result in multiplying issues exponentially. So I think this is our mindset. Again, it's a risk, David, that we are not going to react fastly. Let me see something for me before I say something else.
Adesh, can I ask you, what are the words at the top of your slide? Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam.
What is that?
Can I ask you, what are the words at the top of your slide?
Okay, sorry, I should have, sorry, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam is going to come later on, but thank you very much. Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam is a Sanskrit word thousands of years ago, when we thought, human beings, the people, Indians thought the whole world is a family. The whole world is a family. And classically speaking, they have included not only human beings, but including any living beings. They're all part of the family in a larger perspective. But we don't look at larger perspective. We say the whole world is a family. Vasudhaiva. Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. Kutumbakam. Kutumbakam means family. Vasudhaiva. Vasudhaiva is a Sanskrit word for the earth. For the whole earth. We have like it. Thank you for asking.
Thank you.
Right. This is a mitigation strategy, but because of that thing, if I had an hour to solve problem, I would spend 55 minutes thinking about problem and 5 minutes thinking about solution. This is exactly what you have been preaching a long time, that how do we look at risk from a global perspective, all kinds of issues, and you perhaps will talk about later. And I think this has caught my attention, that very, very often when we look at the risk, we just don't look at the holistic picture. We look at some parts and we say, hey, these are the risks here. But when you look at integrated way, the risk will be many much more important. And this is the last two slides I'm going to show you before we come back here. It was Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. It is written in the Sanskrit word. There it was in English. The whole world is a family. Now this is hope for a better world. This is interesting. I only did it yesterday. It's nothing very, very new. And I just want to show you, this is your 5 elements which Indian philosophy talks about: the earth, the air, the ocean, the fire, and the space. These are the 5 elements which makes the planet. So this is one part when we look at planet. It's the planet, family of all kinds, kings and queens and beggars, brown and yellow, white and any number. So, combination of people, female, child, they're all part of this family, human beings. The third part is the economy, the profit, planet, people, profit, economy. These are the economies growing. So here, in my opinion, which I'll talk later, this is not relevant right now, so I'm not going to reply to you, but it will come back to you later on this slide. This is very interesting to me. Earlier in the evolution of human race, brain adopted to ensure physical survival. Now in pandemic reality, the risk is, there's a risk that we have to challenge the brain is to ensure its own survival. The brain has to survive. And how do you change your brain when you become 50, 60, 40? There is a time constant, there's inertia. This inertia, as you said, David, is a risk to handle this pandemic. So I would say in this particular statement, the greatest challenge to us is to change the way we think by acting fast in the digital and disruptive unknown world. And this I will come later on the strategy, how do we do this. So at this time, I will stop your particular things.
I think that's really very interesting, Adesh, and to take that bigger picture, and you introduced the word hope, which is in the title of our discussion, and somebody put in the chat box, I really need some hope. And I think there are a number of ways we can help people to generate hope. One is with the bigger picture, which you've begun to introduce, and we'll come back to in just a moment. But the other, I think, is in the more tactical area, in what's coming in the next 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, as well as where we might be going in the next 2, 3, 5, 10, 50 years. And so in terms of some tactical things, I think I'd just like to introduce the idea, and you talked about needing a change of mindset, that risk arises, risk is about uncertainty that can affect our objectives. So I define risk as uncertainty that matters. Lots of uncertainties don't matter, they're not risks. The risks are the uncertainties that matter. And in terms of mindset, risk arises from conditions that we have which are already in existence, one of which is the coronavirus pandemic. So that is a certainty, but out of the certainty of the pandemic, uncertainties arise. And in terms of a change of mindset, we really need to see that not all those uncertainties are bad. one of the things we've learned in the world of project management and business over the last 20 years, and in fact it's been a much longer term view over thousands of years actually, is that not all risk is bad. That some risk, if we embrace it, can create additional benefits, can create better and faster ways of achieving our objectives. Not just threats, but also opportunities. And in terms of generating hope for the short term, I think we need to encourage people to think that the risks that come out of the coronavirus pandemic are not all bad. Yes, of course, we'll find that some people will lose their jobs, some people, whole areas of industry will find it difficult to recover, hospitality, transport, aviation, these sorts of parts of industry could find it very difficult to recover. And there are some bad things which we need to think about. But there are also potential good things, potential opportunities and upsides which could come from this pandemic. And you mentioned one, which is the way that the pause in our economic activity has helped the planet in terms of reducing emissions, in terms of reducing travel, in terms of allowing the world to breathe again. And I've been like you, listening to the birds in my garden and breathing the fresh air and the peace when there aren't cars going by all the time and airplanes going overhead. It's wonderful. How can we include that in the way that we build back after the pandemic, after lockdown? How can we build back better? And I think what we need to do is recognize some of these opportunities, but we're not definitely going to get the opportunities unless we see them and respond to them proactively. So threats are uncertainties in the future that might happen and would hurt us unless we do something about it now. And so the idea is to prevent, avoid, mitigate, reduce threats. But opportunities are also uncertainties in the future that could help us, that could bless us, that could grow us, but they're not certain. And we have to respond to them now and be proactive in order to capture them, exploit them, enhance them, improve their possibilities of occurring. And so I'd like to, as part of the call for hope, to say to people, yes, we have a terrible condition. The world is suffering from the pandemic and the aftermath, the lockdowns, the health challenge, the economic challenge. And there are uncertainties which are coming down the track which could hurt us that we need to see and respond to. But also there are uncertainties ahead of us which could be really helpful that we could embrace. And I'd like to suggest that those things occur at the personal level, in the way that we are individually, in the way we treat our health, in the social level, the way we respect our key workers, the way we look after our vulnerable neighbours, the way we treat people in society, and also at the national level, as you've touched on, that the world is a family and we can't anymore have isolationism. We have to think about our supply chains. What do we bring home? What do we share? And I think a lot of these things are opportunities that if we don't do anything, will just drift away. But if we see them and we respond to them proactively in a coordinated and energetic way, we can capture some of those opportunities in the same way that we hope to avoid and minimize and mitigate some of those threats. So for hope, I think, yes, of course, there are bad things that we need to stop, but there are also good things that we need to act now in order to capture. I'm sure you agree.
Very good, very good. Excellent, excellent. I just wanted to continue with take further to what you have said, and I entirely agree with what you have said. And let me again show some of the things which you have said. Fortunately, I also believe in the same as again, let me share this with you and come back to the slide. This is the slide. And I think this is a very, in my opinion, before that, let me see. This is the slide. I want to start. This is very, and I've used this slide since the last 8 years. Only coloring scheme keeps on changing, the font size keeps on changing. And I really believe the dynamic adjustment of vision, just a small part of the whole most complex human system, just a very tiny, small one. Look at the beauty of our creation. Eye, long distance, it adjusts focal length. Medium distance, it adjusts focal length. Reading, it adjusts focal length. Dynamic, long distance, it adjusts. Natural lens adjusts the focal length depending on the distance, variable focus. Do we have that in our mind? Do we create that? That our mind is not only looking short-term or long-term, short-term gain, long-term loss. I think how do we adjust these three components? And you see the next slide, which I suggest. I've added up these three things for this only. They were for project management. The writing which you see here were different, but I have changed these things to suit today's program. Now look at the mind, our mind. Can we look at global perspective first? Then we look at regional perspective, Asia, Europe, America. And then we look at our national perspective, UK, India, China, Bhutan, Nepal, African countries, some of our good countries. Can we adjust that? Can we look at that? My very strong belief is unless we see the whole, if we concentrate here, we are myopic. We can only read books. We cannot see sky. So this is the relationship between whole and parts. Hope is very strong. This pandemic has taught us it cannot be an exercise of one nation. You've got to bring everybody on board. And therefore, I quote one of my favorite author, Dr. Harari, one of the finest historians. He did a lot of work in the University of Oxford. David will know personally the work he has done. He says, and I bring that very clearly, knowledge is useless unless it changes your behavior.
I agree.
We can all learn. We can go through 1,000 webinars. We can do every learning and learn. But where are we changing our mind? How the inertia of mind should be reduced so can we move. If the inertia of mind is so much, it does not allow you to move at all. M into A, mass into acceleration is force. If mass is too heavy, the mental mass, where is the acceleration? So Dr. Harari is saying changing the behavior, doing some action. Believing in discontinuity. This is my, I've just quoted him, but these are my tutorial. Discontinuity is, disruption has taught us, is not continuous. And a lot of us believe, as David mentioned, it's not a black swan. A lot of these reports were given, a lot of these things way back in 2007. They said, whatever is happening is great, all right, it will continue the way it is. Future is the extension of today, but future is not the extension of today. That's right. Otherwise, future will not be called future. It will be called present. Future is discontinuous to present. The one which is my end part 2, just before we come to the next part. So this is what I just wanted to supplement what you have said, David.
I think that's really important, and to keep the bigger picture and the detail. And one of the things one of the things we want to do in this webinar is to try and share together the wisdom of the East and the West, and to bring together different perspectives in order to create something which is useful to everybody. And I think that idea of the long term, the long perspective and the medium perspective and the close perspective is really important. And that's why when we're talking about risks, we talk about risks in relation to objectives. So the objective is our long-term goal, but we have to manage the detail down here in order to get there. And so people who are interested in risk management or in project management or in business or in national security or in global business have that dual perspective of what we're trying to get to and the detail of how we're going to get there. So I think that ability to dynamically adjust our focus is really, really important. And in terms of that sort of wisdom, I think the question is knowing when to apply which perspective. Sometimes we have to take the big picture and focus on what our goals are and where we're going. And sometimes we have to stop and say, no, this piece is important. And I need to work out how to make this piece work in order to get to the bigger goal. So how do you think, Adesh, in terms of wisdom, we can make that decision to use the knowledge to change behavior? Wisdom is embodied knowledge, isn't it? Where we build it into the way that we think so that we act differently. So if we want to try to maintain both the long perspective and the close perspective and switch between them appropriately in order to change our behavior, in order to create hope for the future, what wisdom can we draw on to help us to decide where to focus?
Again, I will take help of these slides. And because I know these questions, I was expecting some of this thing from you. So let me see where I wanted to show you. This is the one. Second part, I did not this. I think.
I'll come to that. This is a great slide, Adesh. I think there's so much in this, and I think you've done something in bringing together the people and the planet and the economy in a really important way.
David, I must share with my all colleagues here. Somehow I am a great worshipper of symbolic of learning, goddess Saraswati. In all these 6 continents, including America, Europe, Australia, Middle East, I start my training program. 3 minutes, Vandana, Saraswati symbolic of learning. I was doing a very important program Friday, Saturday, Sunday. It just finished last night, 8 o'clock. And I was so much harassed. And I said, David is on the other side, the risk doctor, and I'm panelist with him. How can I be trying to be equal to him? So this message came to me and my colleague Rakesh. I told him yesterday at 8 o'clock, using the black whiteboard which we had disconnected. This is what I want. He finished his first trial at 1 o'clock, 1:30 mile, and slept at 1:30. This morning again, modified this. It's all something which comes from the outer space. I don't know what it is.
Well, Adesh, let me just, I'm going to interrupt you because I think it's important for us to say that we're not seeking to be equal here, that we both respect one another and we both have different perspectives. But there was an American businessman, his name was Wrigley, and he said, if 2 people think the same, one of them is unnecessary. If 2 people think the same, one of them is unnecessary. We think differently, we come from different contexts, we have different experiences, and that's what makes our interaction valuable. So I think the key thing here is equal respect, and of course we're different, and that's what makes this interesting. So I'm not equal to you, and you're not equal to me.
David. Now I said today these 3 wholes: people, planet. There's one positive. Maximum positive you can go is 3 everywhere. Shows 2, but 3. One is common to everybody. 3 positive, 3 positive, 3 positive. So there's 1 positive out of 3, just for the sake of usage. 1/3 where we could go. Here is, instead of 3 positive, we are 1 negative. We are in a bad shape. Global warming, Siberia having 38-degree temperature. Ocean rising. We are blind to the climate change. Peter Morris keeps on telling me, a great friend of mine, a great thinker, Dr. Peter Morris. David knows him well. He keeps on saying, Adesh, the project management community has failed to recognize the environment sustainability in their charter. And he contributed to make the charter. By the way, David is one of the 37 signatories to the World Forum, which we'll talk a little later. Now, human beings, I say, is a 0, neither too bad. Some people are raised, a lot of people still poverty, a lot of people have come to that level. We would say neutral, 1 positive, negative. What is the utopia? And the world, if all world works together, the economy could be 3+, solar, windmills, solar, Tesla. No, hydrocarbons must be dead. They cannot survive. 10 years from now, I believe there will not be oil to be used. This sun, the planet will be so beautiful, beautiful sun is coming. These are the beautiful things. And child is happy. No child trafficking, no child misuse, no child abuse. We responsible citizens of this world have been so selfish not to look at these things carefully. So a strategy for us to make sure while we are moving here, we cannot neglect this. There's contradiction between these two, contradiction between these two, contradiction between these two. Ultimately, in my opinion, the number one importance is planet, people, and the economy. Because if you do not create wealth, people will also die through hunger. So there's a relationship between wealth creation, but distribution could be more equal. I can say 20 million millionaires and 2,000 billionaires create 160 trillion economy, 8 times that of the United States. So there's one divide. There has to be other part of the world which needs that kind of living being so that they can live a decent life. So my first suggestion would be, do grow towards this utopia with a more sustainable planet. Do make sure education, public health systems become good to people who cannot afford to go to medicine and seeing their daughter die in front of the eyes. It's the most pitiable things human beings can tolerate. See their own children dying because they don't have something to take care. So I think we should look at the planet and people, but we need this economy. We have to balance. There are contradictions, but it's a challenge for us to look at, challenge, hopefully. And I would just continue and just to say, that's it. That's all what I wanted to say. Strategy to balance economy. Some countries want economy to go, school to be only open without understanding scientists, people who have dedicated their life to what could be the outcome. No, start opening a school. I believe everybody's right. Every human being is right. There's something positive, but we should need to balance. Balancing is what project management and risk management is all about.
Yes, I think you're right. And I think it's important for us to learn from one another. You were quoting earlier from the Upanishads, which of course I've read, and the Vedas and so on. And I think it's important that we look over the fence, that we embrace the learnings from one another. Maybe we should at this point just talk about the World Project Management Forum. I think just in terms of the time that we're spending together, I noticed somebody said in one of the questions, one of the chat boxes here, I hope the good doctors don't just stick with philosophy, but they give us something practical to work with. And I think we've talked about reasons for hope, that the risks that come out of the pandemic, which the world is suffering from, some of them are bad and we need to avoid them, but some of them could be good and we need to embrace them. We need to work out which are the good opportunities. And in order to do that, we need to respect both the people and the planet and the profitability of our economy. And these things we need to balance together. And we need to recognize that the world is a system, the world is a family, we belong together, we are one world, or one family, as you said very, very powerfully earlier. But we also need some practicalities. And I would say that some of the practical techniques of risk management could be useful in terms of identifying and capturing opportunities. And we don't have time to go into the detail of what those specific things might be. We'd also want to say that resilience is important. Certainly people predicted these pandemic possibilities over the last 2, 3, 5, 10, 30 years. What we need to do is to build resilience at the personal level, personal resilience, project resilience, business resilience, and national resilience. And that's something that we should all be focusing on. But I think the other thing to say is that there is a place in terms of building back better, practical things we can do, which would be the world of projects. And that I know is your own particular area. It has been your passion and your career in terms of building better projects. So could we just talk about the role of the World Project Management Forum? which is an initiative of yours, which you started, maybe was it 2 years ago? I think you've got 36, 37 global signatories of project management authorities around the world who support this. And I'd like to suggest that the World Project Management Forum might be a way of us implementing the sorts of strategies that we've been talking about, the sort of philosophy we've been talking about, the sort of change in mindset in order to make a practical difference in the world. So I wonder if, Adesh, you might just share the purpose of the World Project Management Forum and the sorts of areas that you think it could be working in, and how some of our participants might maybe get engaged in using the World Project Management Forum to create real hope on the ground and to build back better after we move out of this pandemic.
Okay. All right. So let me just again show you the last part of my PPT, World Forum. I've made it whenever, this is just a moment. I'm just going to select this. Here, David, you remember in early 2019, last year, we have started involving all of you. I've written to you in April 2019 to about 100 global leaders, Peter Morris from World Bank, and David Pels, Hiroshi Tanaka, and all that. What should we do? Because most of the associations, they only look at operational aspect, execution. So based on the lot of inputs, I must say, my global friends, is an example. All of you contributed, and you have been one of the 37 original signatories to the charter. Charter has gone through 18 rounds of correction. I must say the 18th round was when somebody insisted from Finland that the charter, Adesh, is not right. Why? One thing is missing. And what is that? Sustainability and environment. Peter Morris also said that. Got to include it, which we did, but they're so vital. So we have looked at this charter to look at the creation phase. Our emphasis on creation. When we look at the creation of fighting pandemic, we should not be rushing. We should not be rushing for making just vaccine. What is the creation? What is the global view? How do we work together? Everybody's competing with each other. The more earlier you make vaccine, you will become billionaire. The stocks will go 100 times. So that can't be. I mean, that's not the right thing to do creation phase. We have a project to overcome. We have a project to create vaccine, to fight this deadly man, deadly enemy. So this is the idea of the creation. World Forum will concentrate in the creation part, as you know, and you have given some ideas to us. And the title last year in December, this forum was Creation, Aligning Present to Future Prospects. Interesting. What you see in COVID, interestingly, the title was given last year, the 7th, 8th, 9th December, but it really echoes the sentiments of what we are seeing, the present and future, aligning the creation. Vaccine is, of course, one project such like that, but there may be more projects like lockdown and all that. And I'm just going to show you 2 more slides. And I've taken this out of the charter. Today's dynamic, unpredictable, and disruptive, volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous VUCA world requires global understanding and convergence of the cyberspace, physical space, and biospace. ... And the other one which I have taken from charter, vision realization should balance economic, social, ecological consideration, which we have talked about. The final aspects of vision realization must be integrated in meeting demands of the present, without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. This is very interesting. And a lot of people globally, and we all contributed, all of us 37 signatories were very important to make this. And I think this is where I just wanted to close on this part. And I would like to thank you from my part to give me this opportunity to work with you as a panelist. And this is what I would like to stop now at this point.